So we're going to do the last. We're going to start with the last session. It's the last session of the afternoon. I'm Alex Matthew. I'm a consultant neurologist. I'm chairing the session this afternoon. It's we've got first of all the video poster, the Voster Award, and then we've got two talks. So it's my great honor to present the Voster Award. So we'll go in from third to first place. So third place goes to Chris Stone for evaluating the feasibility and acceptability of a smartwatch-based smoking relapse intervention, stopwatch. So I don't know if Chris is here, but if Chris is here, there's a prize. Oh, here you go. Congratulations. You're welcome. Oh, picture. Do you want to? So is it? Oh yeah, you're going. So, yeah. Okay. Congratulations. And then second place goes to Peter Barnes for design of electronic patient reported outcome measures, EPROMS tool for patients with breast cancer. Is Peter here? So we'll just clap for him in obsession. And he's got a silver, you can take a picture of the silver. Okay, there you go. And so Mark has kindly offered to cook dinner for first place, which is Hannah Clements from the South Yorkshire Digital Health Hub. Is Hannah here? Oh. Congratulations. And here we go. So you take a picture. Congratulations. All right. So thank you for our winners, and thanks to all the people who sent in entries but didn't win a prize. It's great to have all those entries. Now we go to the talks. So the first talk is by Subath Premaratne, who started his professional life as a software developer and now is a vascular surgeon and a transplant surgeon. Has retained an interest in digital health, obviously, and is going to tell us about MedEct Connect.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex, for that introduction, and thanks, Mark, for the invitation. Can you get my presentation? No, I think it runs on a browser. Right. So I'm going to talk to you about a product we've been working for the last maybe 8 months. So this is a medical education product we have developed. We had a company who volunteered that and did all the work free of charge for us. So can you move to the next slide? So what's the problem with medical education? So as we all know, like we get coupled up with the clinician and you go and observe what the clinician does. And it's more of an apprenticeship. And when you become slightly more senior trainee, you are given a certain set of guidelines and you have to go and observe certain procedures or learn certain subject areas. And I can remember, for example, in my case, we used to write our phone number in theater and say, oh, if this operation happens, like if there's a ruptured AAA, just ring me. I'll come on even on a weekend because I need to get that signed off. And that's how we used to learn. And now the modern generation, like especially my trainees, they come and say, oh, why don't we have an app for this? So that's how this product actually, the first idea came from a medical student, a junior doctor, FY1. He came and said, oh, why don't we have an app so that when you do a particular type of operation, I want to come and see that. So next slide, please. So we thought, why won't we create this product? We'll create a web application where clinicians and so the trainers and the trainees both can log in, and we can match them together. So the idea was we'll have real-time messaging. So we have a system where we can. So if you say I want to see a certain type of procedures and I'm willing to travel a certain area, say I wouldn't mind traveling up to 1 hour, we can signpost you where these procedures are happening, as long as those hospitals or the clinics or the GP practices are willing to teach you. Especially if you're a medical student in that area, you will have access to all those clinical areas. So that's the kind of tool we wanted to develop. Next slide, please. So if you have a phone with a camera, you can use this QR code. You can go to the platform and have a look at it. It's mededconnect.com, and so it works through. So what we have is a front end using React and a back end using SQL Server. Next slide, please. And we started it as a progressive web app, and it's a web responsive, mobile optimized web application. So you can create your own login. We are using NHS emails for clinicians. So we want to make sure that we vet them. So there's a vetting process. And we also have a process where if you're a medical student, you have to log in using your university or institution email address. So that way we make sure that we have genuine trainees. Like we don't want anybody like coming and just observing our procedures. So we have a system where there is a group of clinicians who are looking at the applicants and we vet them. Next slide, please. So essentially what we're trying to do is to create a system where we give tickets, almost like, say, for example, if I'm doing a procedure, so this is a procedure which I did a couple of months ago. What we did was we trialed this, and I said, I want to have 3 people. I'm happy, maybe 1 medical student, 1 co-trainee, and 1 senior trainee to come. And so I can list those 3 tickets, and those tickets will be advertised. And anybody who's willing to come, they can book those tickets, and they will be. Again, there's a vetting process, and the clinician can approve whether they allow them to come to the theatre, or even any clinical area for that matter. And then you come and observe the procedure, and then you can give a feedback. Next slide, please. So this is not only for procedures, you can do it for a ward round, case-based discussion, and a clinic, any environment. And so this is where it shows how you can populate the tickets, and the tickets can be booked. And then once you are approved, when your student log in, you can see that you have been approved to come into that theatre. And if there's any change, because in this current environment in the NHS, we sometimes have to cancel surgeries because of lack of beds. So again, we have a reporting system where you will be sent a message if for example, if the day before it gets cancelled, you get a message saying there's no point in coming tomorrow. Next slide, please. So this is what the dashboard looks like. So you'll get if you have booked in different procedures to go and see them, you'll get a calendar view as well as you get individual views of each procedure. And we have a facility where we can upload photographs, we can upload details about the procedure, we can show where the location of the hospital, and it also gives you a map how to navigate yourself to that particular area. Okay, next slide, please. So we are using the current kind of principles underpinning like adult education and even medical education theories. So we're trying to make the students. So most of the students are adult learners. So and this way we're giving some responsibility to the students themselves to make sure that they can select what areas they want to improve or what areas they want to go and learn. And that way they can self-direct their own learning. Next slide, please. So what are the other benefits for the educators? I know all of us are quite busy, and we don't want this tool to be another tool like with all the educational tools we use. What we're trying to do is, say, for example, if you have a repetitive clinic, which you have the same, say, for example, I do a varicose vein clinic, and every Thursday, that's just a varicose vein clinic, and I don't want to re-advertise this every week. So we've created a mechanism where if repetitive task or repetitive learning opportunities can be advertised automatically. And again, as you know, for revalidation, we need to show evidence of teaching. And if you are, especially if you have any academic kind of links with the university, you need to keep a track of your educational activities. So we will maintain that logbook for you within this tool, and then you can download it and print it off, and you can use it as your evidence. And when it comes to the learners, now with the new curriculum, so we have now a competency-based curriculum even in surgical practice. So that means you do not need to do 5 years of training. If you can show within 3 years that you can achieve certain competencies, you will be signed off. So the trainees can go and do these procedures and get them signed off quite early if they're keen. So that's the kind of advantages the trainees will get. And of course, they will have real-time information about, like, so one of the medical doctors said, oh, I want to go and see a lumbar puncture, and I never get to do it because it's mostly done as an emergency procedure. So again, this is because we have real-time reporting, we can alert them saying, okay, there is an emergency procedure happening, go and see it. Same with, I think, ruptured AAA, because that's again an emergency procedure, so it can happen on a weekend. But if somebody's letting me know that I can go and see that, that's quite useful. So that's at the moment we don't have a tool like that, so that's the gap we are trying to fill in. That next slide. That's all I want to talk to you, but if you have any questions, I'll answer them later. Thank you.
Hello everyone, thank you very much. The graveyard shift, right? It's last of the day. Thanks for still being here. So I'm Simon. I'm a endocrinologist, diabetes guy, and I'm a paediatrician. So I only look after kids. Though I do the transition service now, so I sometimes meet people as old as 25, which we were chatting about this earlier. I find that quite scary. But in my spare time, Marcus and I do software, and we're going to sort of talk about our experience of building the growth charts. So this is Royal College of Paediatrics, hence the orange shirt here. But really, I think the big picture is not so much about what we've built, but it's more about how infrastructure is important for developing health, and how I think the big picture is I want to encourage clinicians particularly to get involved in learning the skills of software, and in particular kind of using APIs and how APIs can be transformational. Simple things can actually make big changes in the NHS. It's coming back to that sort of open stuff we're talking about. So we usually start off just by showing the thing, right? Because otherwise... You can operate it there, otherwise you have to look behind you. Okay. Where is it? It's up here somewhere. This thing here. Well, you're the Mac guy. Yeah, no, well, I am. Just need it so you've got the same thing on that screen as on that screen. I'll just back. Yeah. If you be a backbencher, just sit there and criticise. That would be helpful.
I have made a 15-year health informatics career out of doing that. Right. So you can go to RCPCH, growth.rcpch.ac.uk, and you'll see this, which is our demo site. And it works. The front end is a sort of a thin web-based client that is communicating with a back-end API. And we deliberately separated those things to make it easier to integrate, because otherwise you end up with what everybody else has got, which is just an app kind of thing. But you can go and play with this, and you can do what Simon's doing.
So these are fictional kids.
We can generate a whole load of fictional kids just to sort of show you. And it will put them on the growth chart. So no rulers, pencils required. You don't have to do what I was doing as a GP, which is go to the RCPCH website, print off the PDF in monochrome, get that PDF, draw the little dot where the child's measurements were, read off with my eyes what the centile was, put that into the EMIS, and then send this, because it's now documentation, send it for scanning, which is shit enough. But you imagine the second visit, I print the scanned copy and get that sort of degraded. So it's like one of those things where it's like sort of multiply degraded sort of things, like looking down an infinity mirror. Anyway, so we built a digital growth chart, and if you want to play with it, go and play with it. It's always at growth.rcpch.ac.uk. We would be very interested in people's feedback, and if you want to integrate it into your EPR, we're even more interested in that. But the key thing is, for this audience, is like, why did we not build an app, which is what the RCPCH came to me in about February 2020 and said, we want to do digital growth charts app. And I said, no, you don't. You need to build an API. And they sort of, I had to explain what an API was. And luckily, they believed me. And they let me carry on and do it. And I brought Simon on board. And for 4 solid years, we've just been building this thing. It took us about 8 months to have something that was essentially production ready, with a team of 2 working on the code. And
Through the
entire
pandemic,
thing has been open source from the start. The whole point of this is that it's a piece of infrastructure that should exist. And we have loads and loads of things. If you look at medicine, there are small, identifiable, discrete pieces of infrastructure where the need has not been met whatsoever. And this is where clinicians will be doing a workaround. They'll be using MD-Calc on the web page, or they will have downloaded some kind of piece of paper, or they'll be using AI to scan in some kind of thing that the patients have filled in. All of these things signify an infrastructural deficiency. And if you look wider than tech and wider than health, you see that so many things that we live with every day are an API. We just don't call them that. When you go to the tap and you open it, and fresh, clean, safe to drink water comes out, that is an API for clean water. It's been made really simple, so you can communicate, you can operate it. I noticed they have got slightly more complicated in the last few years with like, but generally, we have taken something difficult to do. You do not have to walk for an hour to the river and get questionable water with possibly a dead sheep upstream and that sort of thing. Water, railroad tracks, Wi-Fi, electricity, that little 3-pin plug, that's an API. So when you start seeing these APIs everywhere, where we have previously in human civilization taken something difficult and made it easier, that is all we're trying to do. So we took digital growth charts. The bit that's difficult is the back-end stuff. It's taking this data table, which is not what you think. It's not a lookup table of like weight centile. It's really complicated statistics that's used to simulate a normal distribution for each and every age band of which we've measured. And they are approximations, but they're standardized approximations. You have to get your head around all that. You have to be able to write it, and you have to understand the clinical significance of that. And so myself and Simon, because we're clinicians who code, we can do 2 bits of that. And we had a statistician who happened to be the statistician that invented the method, the LMS method. So Tim Cole was our tame statistician who helped us with this whole thing. So we were able to take that back-end stuff and push it down into what I call the don't care layer, which is you don't care where the water came from when you use the tap. Do you care? Do you even know? How would you find out? Same with electricity. I mean, we can push things down into a commoditized layer, but we just don't in healthcare. So we pay for Cerner to put growth charts in at great expense. We then pay TPP to do it again, badly. We pay Epic to do it again with results that we cannot test because they won't let us test. I mean, we've proven that EPIC's growth charts don't result in the same answers that ours do. It's only a very small error, but we have told them that they won't do anything about it.
So yeah, growth charts are super complicated. I mean, I've been an endocrinologist for 15, 20 years now, and there's it's the thing about growth in kids is it's the single most sensitive measure of health in children. So, you know, whether you're a diabetologist or a gastroenterologist, sort of doesn't really matter. The first thing that you look at in clinic actually is your growth chart, because if somebody's got an illness, chances are they're not growing properly, so that's helpful for you to know. If they're on treatment and you want to know if they're responding to treatment, you look at your growth chart because they will be growing quicker, if you see what I mean. So for all sorts of reasons, the growth chart is super important. But like Marcus says, it's not a question simply of just drawing a chart on a screen. The actual how you render it and so on, where those numbers all come from, is all super complicated. And it's not fair to expect people that make all these different EHR platforms to totally understand the methodology. I mean, I've spent the last 4 years as somebody with a background in endocrinology doing this stuff, and I found it very confusing. So I don't really understand how software developer who's based in Minnesota, who's never even, you know, been to the UK potentially, can get their head around all these issues. I think for this you need clinicians that kind of get both issues.
I'll skip through the next few slides really quick, but basically, if you just go to 5, infrastructural problems are a type of problem, and they usually require standardization. They're complex and hard to build. You've got to get agreement. And so, because nothing existed in this space, we could just do what we wanted. So our API response is a standard structured response. It's not FHIR, actually. We could wrap it in FHIR, could put it inside a FHIR observation if anybody had asked me for that. But actually, not a single one of our integrating customers has said, please make my life harder by putting this very simple response inside an enormous piece of metadata that doesn't do anything. So we will put FHIR in there if anyone asks for it. But we can do it because we're the Royal College. So a competitor cannot come along and say, we've done it as well, and ours is better. They just get laughed out of clinic by all the Royal College has members. It has got complete buy-in from every paediatrician, and they're, by extension, GPs, health visitors, school nurses, other people who deal with children will rely on the RCPCH's say-so. So it's like, treat it like an API infrastructural problem. Get a Royal College involved, which is, I did not think that would be the secret sauce, but it is. Not all the Royal Colleges are ready for this yet. Some of them are very much against the idea that they might build software, but they will all come round to it because this is now starting to get some traction. And one thing they are good at is talking to each other. So when the RCPCH is making like $500,000 a year from the API, because we do charge for the API, it's a sustainable product. It's a commercial open source product. You can run your own API. You can totally get the code and run it for yourself in your own server. And if you do that, you would need to get your own clinical safety officer. You'd need to verify that you've done it right. You would need to have medical device registration, because this is a class 1 medical device that we're registered with. I've done all that for you. I am the clinical safety officer, and I registered the medical device. So that's what you're paying for. The warranty wrap, the service wrap, and the fact that you don't have to care about it, and we do the infrastructure. Thinking about every clinical problem like that would mean that we have turnkey solutions that can be embedded in the existing EPRs. We can't expect to throw out the existing EPRs, and we can't afford to pay them all to put in all of the, say, 700 clinical calculations that we might need in clinical practice. You can't afford it. So you've got to commoditize them all. I think that's probably it.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing. So we just out of interest, in my trust, we've just implemented Epic. We were apparently the largest implementation of Epic in Europe at the time, which was 2 years ago. Guy St Thomas's King's. And I was given the growth charts, you might imagine, right? And Epic was very, very keen. They didn't want to take my open source API. They wanted their own in-house product that they'd already got. And I said, well, that's fine. Just show me the evidence that it works, right? Show me your unit tests. Show me that the numbers that I'm putting in clinic are giving me accurate results. And after a year of emails, they just went quiet. They refused to give them to me. They stonewalled me. And of course, you know, I'm a small guy. I'm like, paediatrics is already quite niche in a healthcare organisation, especially something like GKT. Paediatric endocrinology is smaller than paediatrics. You know, we're talking about maybe 10 people across the whole, however many thousands. It's very easy just to ignore. And so that's what we've got. We've now actually got growth charts that don't even look that good, and I have no idea if they're accurate. And that's sort of what we're up against. Whereas I think if you have a service that you're sort of giving away cheap, that's already been designed and built by the standard setting organisation in the UK, you know, who's not going to use that really? So
It comes down to sort of, Royal Colleges are the standard setting organisations. We're all happy with that. Royal Colleges like 1.0 is we write documents and you post them out to members. Royal Colleges 2.0 is like they've got websites and you can now download the national guidance on something from your Royal Colleges website in a PDF and you can read it. Royal Colleges 3.0 is this. It's best practice as code. And if you've got the backing of your Royal College to do that, you know, you can go a long way. We've got inquiries now from California that want to use their own, they have different growth chart references, but they want to use this engine because it solves a problem for them. They're a startup. They do not want to have to build this themselves. And they would get it wrong. So, you know, we're really starting to get some momentum. And I'm hoping, you know, firstly, I think it's a reproducible model. There are certainly lots of parts of it that other people could take away from this room and say, I've got a problem, this is how I might change the way I solve it. Don't think about apps, think about APIs, infrastructure, and Royal Colleges.
cool, I think that's it, yeah.
I think it's question time. Do you want to come back up? The microphones. Anyone have any questions? So they're at the back.
Hiya.
Do you want to go first?
Is that working?
Yep.
Lovely. I have a question for each of you, if I may steal 2 questions. So first of all, with regards to the MedEd net thing, I thought one absolutely brilliant. I'm very interested in education, so it's an absolutely brilliant idea. Out of interest, do you have, because I know obviously you've got a good way of collecting data and things like that, have you kind of flipped it the other way as well, in that you can collect data on bad people? That's probably the best way I could put it. You know what I mean? There are some clinicians that, you know, the people that never turn up when they've booked these sessions, a bit like when you leave a bad review on Airbnb. Do you have like a, you know, a bad guest version? Can you look at it the other way?
At the moment, we have a way you can rate. So you can, like you rate your Uber driver, you can rate the clinician. But there's a lot of discussion going at the back, and because we might have to remove that because the trust doesn't want us to implement that.
Yeah, if they don't like the way you did that FemPop or something.
It's more
scary implications, doesn't it?
I'm not so much thinking about the clinician actually giving the teaching. I'm thinking about the student here, you know, the trainee that's turning up. And actually, if they turn up and they're like shoddily dressed and their hygiene's not great, you know what I mean? And
That one.
it's another way of feeding, because you wouldn't want to therefore encourage other people to take on this trainee, but also there must be a way of feeding that back. Do you know what I mean?
So we're having this discussion with Queen Mary University of London. So there are a lot of nuances like this where we need to kind of iron out before we can fully implement it. So, but at the moment it runs, but we are not giving any feedback to anybody yet. But that facility is already built in.
Okay, brilliant. And then my second question for second 2 was, again, I thought it was a really useful chart, and having had a child who's purely got referred to paediatrics because somebody didn't plot the graph correctly. Naturally, they were 5. Again, it's like, do you have kind of, I guess, safety mechanisms built into your part, like, as in, like, once you put data in, is it relatively easy to take it out again? Because sometimes there are some systems, aren't there, once you put that data in, no matter what you try, you can't take it out, and then it almost leaves that black mark of a bad bit.
That's one of the...
Easy? Yeah.
We solved that by a very simple architectural choice at the beginning.
Yeah.
We do not persist any data at all.
Yeah.
We are a calculator. So if you're a clinician sat in front of an EPR system, that EPR is where the data will stay. That you have a direct care relationship with the patient, you have a legal basis for storing that information. So your EPR makes an API call with the relevant information, and we send back the answer, which is centile is, say a centile is 0.2, okay? And you persist that there, and every time they go to clinic, you persist another one, and so after 10 clinic visits, your EPR has 10 sets of responses from our API, and you persist them in the EPR. They can replay those to the chart, so you can see the chart anytime you want, without having to hit our API 10 times for all the responses. You keep those responses, and you can then track the changes over time, which is what we're interested in, because we're never interested in a point centile, are we? It's always the trend. So that's it. We sidestepped that. Had we decided to persist information, the project would still not be finished, because it would have taken the information governance problems alone would have made it massive, and then we'd also be dealing with researchers saying, oh, can I have access to the fire hose of all the data? And I'm like, well, what about the test data? How do you know that these, somebody's not just playing with the API rather than measuring an actual child and that sort of thing? Data quality is important, and so you can just get around that by don't go there.
Yeah.
The data is in the EPR. Anyone who got a legal direct relationship with a child can get the data.
Thank you.
So some online questions, yeah.
Yes, online question from David Tang. This is for Sobaf. Question on Med-ED. Are the events tickets automated via EHR, or is it the responsibility of the clinician to update the event in the case of delays? Thanks.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So at the moment, it's up to the clinician, because we didn't want to make it automated, because some clinicians might not want to advertise all their clinical activities. So at the moment, it's a voluntary process, so the clinician has to advertise. But we have built-in tools that can make the process quite easy. You can copy and paste. So if you have, say, for example, I'm doing an aneurysm in another 3 weeks, I can just copy and paste the one I've used before. So like that, there are lots of facilities built in, but at the moment, there's no integration.
Is that it, Mark? I think there was a question there, and then we'll go.
Hi. My question goes to Marcus. How do you deal with the problem that in the pediatric growth charts, how do you, if there's a kind of a preterm neonate or something like that, and if there's a growth retardation in a child, how do you deal with that, like a specific?
Well, we've got the preterm charts are in there.
Yeah, I can
Okay,
show you.
So there are charts for preterm babies.
So you got
It corrects for gestational age out of the box. So you put in the date of birth, the gestation. In the API call that you make, you send date of birth, date of measurement, sex, gestation is a kind of optional parameter. So if you don't send it, it assumes it's term. But otherwise, if you put the gestation in, it will correct for gestation for you, and then you get 2 dots on your chart. You get cross for your corrected age and a dot for your chronological age, and the two are joined. So then you can track premature infants, basically.
okay. I have a second question. How would we deal with the ethnicity issues in the proposed?
So we use the UK WHO growth chart, which is a kind of I don't know how long you've got, but it's a mashup of the WHO data set from early 2000s, which was a longitudinal cohorts from across the world. And then the UK bit, UK 90 reference, which is preterm babies, and then the 4-year-olds and up all the way to 20. So what you plot on a UK chart is based on UK kids, except for the 0 to 4s, which is based on international data, because they were breastfed, not bottle-fed, where the UK 90 came from, if that makes sense. So we have other references in there. We have references for Down syndrome. We have references for Turner. I've just last week put in the Americans. So there are a few extra ones to go in, but if you're a UK child, you would get plotted on the paper UK chart.
There are no ethnically specific charts. For good reason, I think it's kind of amalgamated so that these are just the UK charts. What we do have, though, is mid-parental height, which has always been a part of the paper charts. So, if you are wondering whether a child is pathologically short or constitutionally short because that's their genetic background, and you look at the parents and they're both short, and you put them in mid-parental height, and you can sort of get an idea for, yes, well, this child is, if we follow that trajectory, they're going to be, they are this height now, because they're going to be that height then. Some countries have got their own, what you might call ethnically specific charts. So states like China do have their own chart data, which of course will be very, very, in the majority, people of a Chinese ethnic background. But in the UK, we just amalgamate them all together. Same with the Americans, they amalgamate them all together.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah, you go ahead, and then we got one here.
No, it was just about the UK WHO charts. It was really interesting, Simon, when you first kind of started this a few years ago, I approached our EPR immediately, because we don't have electronic growth charts and everything's moving electronically. They showed no interest whatsoever. Again, I was stonewalled. Loads of emails, completely stonewalled, which was very, very frustrating. But I just, on that point, how do you get around that? I mean, more and more of these EPRs are really dominating the market. I mean, do you see RCPCH 3.0 as the place we go for this stuff now rather than our EPR? Or kind of what does the vision look like when you're being stuck?
So well, the people that have bought into the big providers will likely use the solutions that come with them, probably. But there are quite a lot of people out there who want a cheaper solution that is also the national standard, which is sort of, and there's quite a lot of those. So like we just signed up the whole of Wales just earlier this year. Most of Scotland is coming down the track. And then quite a lot of little places like Cornwall. I say little, Cornwall's not that little, but you know what I mean. It's individual trust is what I mean by little, rather than, I don't think necessarily it's in our interest or anybody's interest to go chasing after massive big teaching hospitals that are, chasing some bigger software provider. And I suspect, hopefully over the years, my guess is that they'll come round.
It's a long game, isn't it?
Yeah,
playing a long
because
game.
it's a national
Hoover
standard,
up the small
and it's
places.
been created by paediatricians with expertise in growth and with the statisticians that invented the paper. If you see what I mean, it's a no-brainer. Why would you roll your own? It wouldn't make any sense.
So what does that look like though? So they have their own EPR, so Cornwall has an EPR system, and then this sits as part of the EPR, or is it separate to that?
Part of the EPR. So
Just sits
that visual that we showed you at the beginning, that is a transferable piece of software. So you can take, that's open source, they get to take that and put it in their, what is usually like a clinical portal or something like that. So if they've got, in the case of Wales, they've got the Welsh clinical portal, and they've got their own data backend, and they've architected it so that the display unit is our React component. It calls to the API, it saves it in their national database of all Welsh people, and you can recall those and display them to the, so it's that is the specific reason why I was talking about APIs, and it changes the point of integration from you need to have a separate app which will not talk to your existing system to put this inside your existing system, do all the working and save to your existing database and all that kind of stuff. So it moves the point of integration much more sort of within the EPR that they've already got, which makes everybody happier.
And there was
Yeah, I had a question. It's largely to do with the attitude of the college, the Royal College, and open sourcing, because essentially what you've done is you've taken some very important IP that they developed, talked about the statistician, the data models, and the algorithms that go with that, and they've given them to anybody who wants them just by downloading your source code. So how did that discussion go with them about that? Because that's punch for them, that's a business model question, right? And they have to get their head around it.
I told them I was building it in open source and that I wouldn't build it in any other way, because I have an ethical stance on open source, which is, I mean, I've written a blog about it I can share with you. But essentially, when you take a medical innovation that's better than what was there before and you keep it secret, you're committing a crime against humanity. I'm deadly serious. A long time ago, the Chamberlain family invented forceps 150 years before they were reinvented. They kept them secret, and conservative estimate, 30 to 50,000 children and mothers will have died from obstructed labour in that time, and the solution was invented but kept secret. So if you don't want to be repeating that kind of thing, it's a duty of a doctor. Maybe it's just because I'm a doctor, but if I've made something that makes healthcare better, it has to be open source. Otherwise, I am harming the ability of my peers to test that this works. I'm restricting the use of it to just the people who can pay me a lot of money. And I find that abhorrent, and I won't do it.
But also don't forget, so the actual data itself is available and free to download. It's licensed. That's all. It's about the licensing. So you can download the LMS tables anyway, if you see what I mean.
Yes, no, I did wonder about the
Yeah.
degree of value in the data tables versus the algorithm for manipulating and presenting, which is the thing that everyone would have to do.
And in fact, the
I'm
LMS
just
method.
intrigued, and I was less interested. I'm really interested in perspective markers, but I was interested in the college's perspective of that angle. They obviously accepted it, but I was interested in because it's a business question for them and where they stand on that kind of ethics.
So
You're
I think-
saying that the Royal College buys it totally into your ethics model.
I think,
Still.
to some extent, I think they make more of a.
That's very interesting.
It is a financial thing for them as well. They're trying to make. Where do they make their money? If they make money out of this, they make money out of selling the paper charts, and they don't obviously print the paper charts. Those are made by a publishing company who probably don't do it for much money anyway.
Yeah.
So they're losing. And I think, remember, they're a Royal College, so their vision is not so much on making money out of charts. Their vision is on disseminating the idea of growing children, of measuring people according to a standard.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way we see it. I see it as democratizing, in effect, the methodology of children's growth, because at the moment it's fragmented. It's hidden away inside these different EHRs that do it imperfectly, as far as I can see, as somebody who now knows about it. And they refuse also to publish openly their own methodology. So for me, the best way to undercut it is to publish your own method. And because it's so complicated, nobody in their right mind they're just going to use ours, right? If we price it relatively cheap, but enough to, pay us all a wage and we keep it maintained and so on, then you've got a sweet spot there, if you see what I mean.
The other thing, just
I think that's more where the college are coming at it.
just
from,
also cut in, the college is a registered charity. Just to highlight that. So, like in terms of business model, it's a charity. Their charitable objectives are to promote child health,
Totally.
not to make a profit.
But they are trying to make money. I think no.
But that's
sure.
part of the bigger picture as well.
Yeah.
If it's sustainable, if it makes money for the RCPCH, then all the other colleges will come and ask us, how did we do it?
Yeah.
And then we'll copy the incubator, which is what we call this little unit. It's a very cute little name that Simon came up with. Children, babies in an incubator. And so we call a little tech unit the incubator. And they'll want one of their own eventually. I mean, some colleges are probably ready to do it in the next 2 to 5 years. Other colleges will take 25 years,
How often do they update the reference data, and how much does that cost to keep up?
So that's academic. So, I mean, the last time the reference data was updated was in the early 2000s, which was the WHO reference. And it's quite political. You don't want to be updating references. If you think about obesity, right, 1970s, 1980s, people were much slimmer. If we remeasure them all now and say, right, well, suddenly 85 kilos, Simon is normal, it's okay. I suddenly slip back from the 91st centile back to the 50th, I'm going to be very happy. But it's not really very good for the whole of, if you see what I mean.
Yes.
So standards, by definition, you don't actually want them to change, because unless genetics changes or suddenly people dramatically get taller. That's the idea anyway.
There's a question there?
Yeah, just a quick one. In terms of, you mentioned sort of getting different trusts on board. Who's doing, I guess, like that sales pitch? Is it you? Is it the college?
Yeah, mostly me. Mostly me and Marcus.
Well, we've got a few strands to that. We've got an open public demo with all of our documentations on that same site, so you can read everything about what we've done. All our code is open source. Our clinical safety case is open source. Our medical device registration is all on that site. So clinicians can go there and they can play with it and say, this is a thing we'd like, and they can become a local advocate in their own trust, perhaps within the paediatric department, and then a bit of momentum within the IT department. So there's that aspect, which is, we put it out there, and we go and talk to people, and hopefully some of those come back as inquiries. But then when it comes to speaking to the actual kind of integrators, it's me and Simon on a call with Susan Hansford, who's our kind of commercial director, and we talk to them and sort of work out the sweet spot for them, you know, how to make it. I mean, we even sort of adapt the pricing depending on the organisation. So, I mean, I'm probably not betraying any confidences to say that it was very important to us to get the whole of Wales to adopt this. So we kind of did a special price for them, you know?
Thank you. Any more questions?
Can I just say, applaud you for the medical device registration.
Yeah.
I think that's the way it's got to go.
2 outs.
Yeah.
Class 1. Yeah. So it's, there are a lot more arduous medical device
Yeah,
classifications.
it's not a defibrillator. Nobody.
Interestingly enough, though, when we looked at the FDA parallel standards, and we wouldn't be a medical device at all in the States, even though they have quite similar standards, but they've chosen to be quite what they call like regulatory. What do they call it? It's like a soft touch regulation on this particular area of clinical calculators. They're just not. They don't see it as an area of risk. So even though they are medical devices,
You didn't die of ever being short, I suppose, which is fine for me.
I mean, it's a fair point, though. I mean, a lot of these things are quite independently testable, in that you can't repeat the calculations. But if you are faced with a piece of software that says this child is on, you know, the 0.01 centile, and you look at them and think, they look about right to me. So you can check it with common sense. It's very different with, you know, some kind of guidance system inside the body that's, you know, for placing an endovascular stent or something like that, where you can't check it, you can't see, you know. So there are medical devices are medical devices, you know. We're on the very lower end of the risk scale, really.
All right. Any last questions? If not, we'll wrap up. Well, thank you very much, and congratulations on making fantastic software. All right, so last talk, it's Mark's going to wrap up. But before he does, could we have a round of applause to Mark and the team for making a wonderful conference for us? And thank you for everyone who's done talks, video posters, and anyone who's joined us from abroad. Thank you very much. So over to you, Mark.
I am indeed, yes. Right, everyone. It's the end of 2024's Let's Talk Digital. It's been a blast. It's been very stressful this morning. But I relaxed at the second tea break and had a chat with a few people, which is what I wanted to do. Just didn't manage to do it for the rest of the day. Sorry if I didn't. I will catch up with you later. We had 147 people join us online, and many thanks for the 46 coffees you bought us today, online and here in person. It's really going to help with keeping these sort of things going. Oh, I wanted to put a very relaxing background on now. Forgot about that. I'm not going to say much more than that, but thank you so much for coming along. Hopefully you've made some new friends, some networking, some collaboration. You've learned a bit about open source. Maybe you're still on the fence 50-50. Who knows? Everyone knows my opinion on this. Open source all the way. Now, I'm not sure there's much more to do except say thank you so much, and please come next year.